And my name is Dr. Maria Kempinska, and I am absolutely delighted to meet Nadine Esposito. Sort of background of risk management in finance, as well as international security, and also sustainable finance and information, and audit and information security. Wow. I must say,
a lot of security.
I love it. I love that though, Nadine, and you're still laughing. But I just think what we're going to talk about, we're talking about not only your work, who you are, but also you're interested in health and wellness, and as a lot of people are in themselves. But I think your view is much broader than that. So can we go into your background? What is your training and what does that mean? We know you have an interest in looking at risk, and we all risk things in life. And security is super important to us, and health and wellness does make us feel secure. But when I read your work, it's so interesting that you have almost superimposed what you know in your corporate world into the world of health and wellness. Yep. Let's start off by talking about your credentials and your background.
Sure, with pleasure. And just on preparing for this interview, I came across the thought that actually living is quite a dangerous thing, right? From a risk perspective, because we have 100% death rate. So from that perspective, we are all super risk managers. And and also coming just from the pure risk background there is nothing like 100% security. So I think those are two quite striking basic principles. When you apply them to health, it just kind of makes sense. But back to your question. So yes, indeed, I'm based in Switzerland, Zurich. So quite standard bachelor's in banking and finance, and then a bit more peculiar master's degree in international security, which I focused on infectious diseases and pandemics. That was in 2010, and there I had a touch point because it's more military security and national resilience focused master. So topics such as public health and national security had also been on the agenda, as well as cybersecurity. And that was my path into the whole information security, cybersecurity domain, where I'm also certified information security auditor. So I also have the auditor background, and transitioned then from this into the more standard risk management, which I'm currently at a fintech bank in Switzerland, a sustainable finance oriented bank, or the first fully digital sustainability bank of Switzerland. And on the side, I always had a passion for the medical aspects, and was already really early on into, blue zone diet and impact of sports on health and impact on nutrition, on performance and brain health. And since I'm also Australian, I got hooked with the topic of gut health and the brain-gut axis very much on before it got popular in Europe and especially Switzerland. I was talking about prebiotics and probiotics like 10 years before anybody in Switzerland got interested in the topic, or the broader public. But on social media and more predominantly also during my events and article, I focus more on the financial angle of aging populations, and there the aspect on an individual level, what it means to live longer, but also on a broader social scale.
I'm so impressed, Nadine. There's so much to uncover here. So what I would like to look at before we go into health is your work in risk management, and how do you've got such a broad knowledge, and which is amazing, and sort of great depth. How do you then decide which aspect you're going to look at in a company? How do you focus?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people always think that as a risk manager, you don't take any risks, and that perception's wrong. As a risk manager, you are fully aware of the risks, and then you define your risk appetite, and it just depends on your risk appetite how much risks you're going to take. It doesn't mean you're not going to take any risks. You just define how much you want to take or how much you can take. And that's important for every company to know which risk vectors you are facing, and then knowing your own risk tolerance, that's how you call it. And those risks which you feel you're not able to accept, or just the downside, the impact of this risk hitting you is too high, you need to implement, we call it mitigating measures or controls within your processes to reduce the risk impact.
So you make a risk assessment and you advise companies, do you?
I'm not in an advisory role, so I'm internal. I'm risk management in our bank. Previously working at Big Four, there we advised obviously companies on how to do it, and nowadays I have to implement it on my own. So
right, that's interesting. So did you create? I'm interested in this. So this background, you've got a lot of depth, and I presume, did you have to create your own risk management system?
Well, it was already implemented, and there you normally tend to take standardized tools. There are a lot of standardized tools, and it's more about the frameworks that you implement. And then on a constant basis, what's important from my perspective is that risk managers are on top of what's trending.
Right.
I mean that there you have differing understandings between a couple of people. Risk management is considered like the second line, risk and compliance. And depending who you ask, people always think that risk management is like lagging behind of the front, but I personally believe risk management even needs to be upfront of the first line, because when you see new trends, there are not any regulations in place. So as a risk manager, you need to see, okay, a new technology, a new trend is coming up. What does that mean for us? And what does it mean that we are prepared in case there are unknown topics coming up? Regulation is there to protect firms and individuals, right? But regulations, I mean, those take years and years. Just looking at AI, we are now gonna have the EU AI Act soon, but AI is now in like a boom since 3 or 4 years, and the risks are here. So companies need to already react before there is a regulation which enforces the actions.
So how do you then ascertain, for example, with AI, without necessarily going into specifics, but how much do you influence your own company with the risk factors that you implement?
Obviously, I hope I have an impact, right? But obviously, it's always a constant working in the background, trying not to be a hindering stone, because risk management is in modern jargon, you call it an enabling function. Right. With my support, I enable the front line to work most securely and efficiently as possible, and I should not be stepping up currently and always, being more a hindering stone to business. So ideally everything runs smoothly without anything happening, and nobody even knows that I was there, right? So that's kind of the ideal world.
But that's amazing, actually. But how much do you have to keep on top of what's happening, socially? I mean, we've never been in such it's slightly chaotic, it's transformative, everything that's happening in our world. How do you keep up with everything yourself?
People who know me, I was already called a vacuum cleaner for information. I love discovering new things and discovering new trends and new ideas. And I think back then at Deloitte, Switzerland, I was one of the very first to even use ChatGPT already. I
love all that.
Yeah, people, I go, oh no, now she found something new again. No, I love to be always on top. I mean, obviously the standard things like newspapers, but also social media, podcasts, yeah, all the tools to discover information.
So let's go back slightly to how did you choose this as a career path?
To be honest, I didn't choose it. It kind of happened in a way. My very first professional dream was military jet pilot, and the second was doctor. So I'm now kind of, maybe with this longevity, moving into this field of medical or close to the medical profession, just because I had always this passion from very early onwards.
And how did your family influence you? What was your parents' background?
My parents' background, they didn't really influence me. Well, maybe they did. So my father is architect, and my mother had multiple fashion stores.
Oh.
So totally different thing, and more on a creative side, less on a risk management side. But they always supported me, especially like education was very important for them, that I got a solid education and that I discovered new things and do the things that I'm passionate about and I truly believe in. I think that was one of the key things that my parents gave me on the way. For my mother, definitely a bit an entrepreneurial spirit. So that's definitely from her side. I don't know, my father, and they were like, 1970s, grew up in that time. For them, it was like, oh my gosh, our daughter is risk manager in a Swiss bank. That is so traditional.
Is that how they saw it?
Yes.
But you've made it, actually, when I looked at your background as a risk manager, and I know people who are in security with technology, and it's almost on the you'd expect a spy to have that knowledge. Do you feel like that you have a lot of covert knowledge that is quite hidden, and that knowledge equally can be translated into many areas at the same time, which it seems to me which is what you're doing?
Yeah, I love to make connections between areas of knowledge that I have. And the more you know, obviously, and the more in different parts you can make connections and linkages. I would say maybe that's really one of my strengths, that I see those connections quite early onwards, and then try to promote them and bring them across to other people. I would say yes, and that is needed from my perspective in a risk management role, or also even in an auditor role, because as an auditor you need to have a wide understanding, especially if you come from from a business perspective. So yeah.
And you have an interest, you were talking about risk in health and how to manage risk in your health. And I love the fact that you have superimposed what you know in the corporate world into health. So tell us how you feel about that. How do you view risk in health?
I would say it definitely would help a lot of people to understand kind of their baseline or how much risks they can take. Because let's be honest, everything down to partying all night, smoking, drugs, alcohol, not sleeping, all of those things, we could pronounce them or categorize them as a risk. And now it depends. It's individual how much risks a person can take. And that is influenced by your genetics. That is influenced how healthy your other lifestyle is, how much stress you have, how resilient you are. And ideally, you know what your background is to make then calculated decisions. And from that perspective, you can say you can apply the traditional, risk assessment and then risk tolerance mindset or approach to all health-related decisions. It might sound super unsexy, but partying all night is kind of a risk-based decision. Okay, I know it's not good for my health and I will feel probably not so good the next day, but what's the upside, what's the downside, what's the risk? Nobody does this consciously, but in the end it's the same principles.
No, I love that. I love the way that you've taken those principles. You've also talked about risk mitigation and also how you assess risk. But we're talking about if a company is, for example, being sold, you have to do your due diligence. But what you're saying is take those optics and look at yourself. So you're inverting those into your own health.
Yes. And especially when I look, when I see people, I just observe people right in my surrounding, and some of them, like, they're super diligent when it comes to financial investments. I mean, they spend hours and hours studying the charts, and then all the pamphlets around funds about the risk profiles and everything. And then they come the next day, oh, I read in a magazine this new diet, or I saw this influencer posting about a new diet, or I'm just going to give it a try. And for me, it's like, okay, guys, just when we talk about the same language as investments, you should see your health as also an asset class. And before you jump on a new diet or you do a new exercise regimen or you make a health-related decision, you should apply the same due diligence process. You should inform yourself. It's not just simply a diet. We know what the impact of nutritional changes are of diets. I mean, if it's down to cutting out certain food groups, if it's down to reducing calories, all of those things, they have quite a significant impact on your health. And that's what I'm trying to promote, is that people should be much more conscious about their health-related decisions, just with the same mindset that they apply to their finances. And I would say even more conscious than with the finances, because in the end, I say that health is overall our most valuable asset that we have.
Yeah, but it's very difficult to quantify. However, you talked about the vagus nerve, the link between the mind and brain and in the body. And of course, the Greeks used to say that the gut was the brain, and then it was changed. So it's and the awareness of that is the role that plays. Tell us about what you've learned about the vagus nerve and the relationship between the gut and the brain.
Well, from the theoretical side, it's everything wonderful theoretically, but just from very own experience, gut health is kind of everything, because in a secondary stage, it starts to mess up with your hormones, and then everything's kind of out of order. So I'm now working actually with a longevity expert, and the very first thing is focus on gut health, right? And you feel it the moment you're stressed, or the moment you are intense, or it just, in German, auf den Magen schlagen, like it really affects your gut. So I think also in Ayurveda, they had it already very well identified that like the central system is your gut.
Yeah, and that's so the Ayurvedic medical approach, the different bodily types and how we respond. There's so much to know, and longevity is very high on people's agenda, but they don't really. I always think that they miss the mental health aspect, because if you don't know why you're alive or make your life worthwhile, what's the point? Or I think they also miss the aspect of social interaction and having a meaning for your life. I think that a lot of people lose that. But just to step back slightly, or step away into stress, there's a lot of people deal with stress nowadays, and stress can overwhelm. But it overwhelms women in a different way to men.
Yeah.
Do you recognize that from your perspective?
I would say, depending how you look at it, it's just there is kind of more and more expected also a bit from women, just looking at friends. And I mean, you need to have a career by now, you need to be professionally successful, but then you also should be woman, and you should take care of the family and everything. It's quite a heavy load. But on this hand, I definitely don't want to undermine any stress towards the men, because the suicide numbers in Switzerland amongst men are like shocking. They are much higher than amongst women. So I personally believe it's more how to cope with stress. And women, I think, are then much more open to seek for help.
Yeah.
Compared to men who don't. I mean, that a man goes to the doctor is already like a super thing. I had this conversation with a couple of male friends who are doctors, and they say like that they get their friends to go to a checkup. It's already such a big thing. And I believe that's a difference in the whole longevity discussion. So we'll know from the longevity side, we know so much, or not so much, but most knowledge that we have is for men, right?
Yeah.
But we don't get the man to go to the doctor. The women, on the other hand, they go to the doctor, but we don't yet have this gender medicine is just on the rise, right? So we don't have the knowledge there yet. So we are facing a struggle. For those who we know what to do, they don't go to the doctor. And for those who go, we don't know what to tell them. So this is a dual-fold challenge that I see in the whole preventative, but also in general, the medical field. And around, as you mentioned, yes, from a holistic longevity perspective, definitely the mental aspects, the social aspects. And for me, it's also that people should be aware that for holistic longevity, you also need to consider the financial stability and security, because the impact financial stress or financial distress has on your mental health and your physical health is so high that you cannot neglect it when you want to really talk about healthy aging.
And do you think, and I think it's unfair really just to put the onus on corporates to become the mother, the father, and take that role. However, that is where people can be influenced. Do you think that there is another way corporates can influence men to go a little bit more without it being a punishment, and influencing what women need? Because, for example, you've got women menopause, and as you mentioned, hormones. Over here, men can buy testosterone online, women can't. So for women, hormone, and I have clients, and I often say, if they're going through something, first of all, you can tell they're going through something physically, is have you had your hormones checked? And here it's very difficult for women to do that on the NHS. Now, I'm not blaming the NHS, because they can be overwhelmed. However, do you think there's more that corporates can do without, sort of overwhelming the corporates and expecting them to take over the role of everything in people's lives?
It's a good question, a difficult question. So I believe enabling also education. I'm a very strong believer of education as a mean to equip people to take care of and take ownership of their own health and wealth, because it's also from a mental perspective very empowering if you have the knowledge to be really in your own driver's seat. I'm not a fan of imposing things or making things mandatory, but as you say, I mean, the options need to be around. What could corporates do? I mean, yeah, maybe on the training side, offer access to training, and maybe also, some flexibility checkups or extensive checkups take a couple of hours time. Maybe you could, say, okay, I have, I don't know, 5 hours per year for medical checkups, kind of just allowing it to also fit in your work schedule, because that's something that drives me nuts. When you want to go to a doctor and you say, okay, I work fully, I need an appointment at H hours, you want to come at 3 p.m. I mean, 3 p.m. When do I have time at 3 p.m.?
No, exactly.
And yeah.
It is, I think the more people like you, Nadine, who speak about this, and, it's such an intelligent approach, which I absolutely love, because I think a lot of people, as you say, don't think about their health. They do think about their health, but it's often when it's negative. And lots of people can be afraid of health. And as you say, men leave it till it's too late. Women, our hormones and our bodies are changing every month, sometimes day by day, sometimes hour by hour. And there's so much. And we are trying to catch up in the medical field. So, but to have education and to prompt people, but as you say, to give them a time frame, so that more people are available at the beginning of a day or at the end of the day, rather than in the middle of the day, where it impacts on everything else that you're doing. There's so much to talk about this, but I do love your approach here. So we're coming almost to the end of our interview, which is fascinating in itself. But how do you approach longevity? What do you look at in your own health?
So for me, physical exercise is a large component. It gives me a structure to the day. It's me time. It's, when possible, time in nature. It's the moment I have my ideas. It happens often that I say, oh, I was running, or I have an idea, and then everybody knows, okay, she was running. It's so much more. It has become like, I wouldn't say lifestyle, but it's part of me, right? And then I also spend significant amount of money and dedication to my sleep quality, just because we all know the importance of a good night's sleep.
So how do you do that? What are your tips for sleeping well?
Oh, well, it starts with those, what is it? Those blue light blocking glasses after 8
Okay.
p.m. Then I have a supplement stack of glycine, a special magnesium salt, um,
Which magnesium?
Theonate, I think.
Oh
I don't
yes,
know how to
theonate. Right,
pronounce it in
yes.
English.
Theonate,
So
yes.
not the citrate, but
Yes.
the theonate.
Yeah.
Um, then I try to not work or not be on the laptop too late, just to reduce kind of the screen time. Then I'm sleeping temperature regulated on a sleep aid mattress.
Mm.
Um, I yeah, so and try to stick to my circadian rhythm, to my time, so I really feel when I'm off those schedule. I limit my coffee intake after 2 p.m. I try in the morning to get up always at the same time, because that sets myself up already, for the next night. I don't train in the evening, just because I feel that I can't unwind anymore if I train too late. Yeah, so all of those things.
And I think what you've said just there are so helpful for people to hear the detail, because a lot of people talk about the overview. Oh, you need your sleep, but a lot of people suffer because they don't know quite what to do. And you've added some components, obviously, sort of magnesium, the blue eye glasses and so on. I often say to people, turn down the lights, sort of stop watching the news. Aspects that you said about exercise. If you exercise too late, it just revitalizes you.
Yep.
So do that in the morning. And, sort of the magnesium and how magnesium can help. All of these things are so important, but you've done all that research yourself, and I love that. And I know you've done an article for the G1 magazine, so I'm very excited. And I know you're going to be working with Harley of London. But I also come back to this point of, I love the way you have taken your, aspect of your work, your interest in security and risk management, and transposed that into our world. But for longevity, is there one thing that you think people are not thinking about for longevity? You've already talked about the vagus nerve and the gut, the brain-gut relationship and so on, and we're just beginning to look, and there's the young chap, Brian Johnson, who is trying to prove a point that he can live the longest. And there's a lot of studies being set up now to do with longevity. And I said, but who's proven the point? And as I look at the points that have been proven, the people that last the longest, live the longest, are those that live in a community, and they have value. But what's your take on longevity?
I believe, and this is now, I assume now the super biohackers won't like me for this phrase, what I say, but we should enjoy our life. I mean, make most out of every day. And that's so easily said, because we got so much wind up in all the work and the stress and everything, that we actually lose to or forget about enjoying ourselves. And that's also one of the key components of all the blue zones. It's having a purpose.
Yeah.
And I mean, Brian Johnson is doing an amazing job, right? But I don't know really if he enjoys himself.
I know, I agree. And I totally agree with you, as a mental health professional as well. And my other world was comedy. I used to own comedy clubs.
Yeah.
And I always maintained that people should enjoy exactly that, find their sense of humor. We have, as a species, been gifted with humor.
Yeah.
And I can tell that you've got a good sense of humor. And
Yeah, it depends who you ask, right?
I know, but you've got to be able to laugh. But I do agree with you that if you enjoy life, it doesn't matter, because we've had people that have really been drinking and smoking till an old age, but they have loved life.
Yeah. And it's about the memories that you make, and it's not for no reason that they ask the people who had been, dying, what they regret most. And it's normally not that you, or in a majority, it's not that people regret what they've been doing, but more the things that they hadn't been doing. So if you now live this super regulated but healthy life, and you have no experiences, and you never tried anything, and you never did anything that's stupid, kind of, yeah, for me, then you did miss out on a lot of things, right? So it's a balance, I would say. And it's a balance we should look for, but this doesn't mean now that you should, just eat crab and drink all every day. It's just, yeah, it's a bit, both sides need a rational, like a reality check, and finding a balance.
I love that. Nadine Esposito, I know we're going to have your work in the One magazine, but this has been an incredibly enjoyable interview, and you have a lot to teach people. And I'm so looking forward to reading more of your work.
Yeah.
So I'm Dr. Zofia Kempinska, and Nadine, thank you so much for the interview.